How you doing?
You're on our billboard. You're the lawyer guy. Yeah.
Better call Saul.
Everyone talks about Walter White's transformation, but nobody admits the show's real moral center was sitting right at the breakfast table. In the gallery of tragic figures that populate Breaking Bad, one name seems forever left out of the museum lighting: Walter Jr., the breakfast-loving, crutch-wielding moral compass of the White household. To some, he's little more than set dressing, an accessory to his parents' spiraling melodrama. To others, he's the only truly decent human being in the entire series. Yet for all the attention paid to Walter's ego, Jesse's guilt, and Skyler's breakdown, Walter Jr. remains both the show's most visible reminder of innocence and its most conspicuous missed opportunity. It is remarkable how a character so physically present in the story can remain so narratively invisible. For 5 seasons, Jr. hovered on the periphery of his father's double life, blissfully unaware that the man pouring his orange juice was also poisoning his enemies. His isolation from the meth-fueled chaos was deliberate and brilliant. By keeping him out of the blue-tinted world of criminal enterprise, the writers preserved one last uncontaminated relationship in Walter White's life. This is what makes the moment he tackles his father in defense of Skyler so devastating. For the first time, Jr. collides with the truth. In that single action, the sheltered son becomes the moral judge, and the show momentarily drops its cynical detachment to reveal something pure. And yet, despite this powerful choice, Walter Jr. is often dismissed as one-dimensional. His narrative diet consists mostly of breakfast, car rides, and the occasional burst of adolescent rebellion. It's as if his entire function were to exist in the kitchen, stirring cereal and reminding viewers that yes, there is still a family at stake here. The writers seemed aware of the absurdity. There's even a running joke among fans about his supposed breakfast arc. But they never resisted the temptation to keep him at the table, rather than at the center. Imagine for a moment a scene where Jr. experiments with different cereals as his father descends deeper into moral rot. Breaking bread, breaking fast. There's more symbolic potential in that than half the show's color palette lectures. Still, calling him flat ignores the subtle defiance R.J. Mitte imbued in the role. Jr. isn't the show's philosopher, chemist, or killer. He's its survivor. When both Walt and Hank succumb to the fragility of their bodies, one from cancer, the other from bullets, Jr. remains the only man in the family who never uses his disability as an excuse. It's not fun to be disabled, he admits early on, but it doesn't define me. In a series about men who destroy everything trying to prove their strength, that quiet line may be the most masculine thing ever said. His character finds depth not in grand gestures, but in moral clarity. The sequence in Ozymandias, when he sides with his mother, calls the police, and shatters whatever remained of his father's self-image, is one of the few times Breaking Bad forces its anti-hero to face genuine, unambiguous rejection. It's a rare moral moment in a show addicted to moral ambiguity. For viewers conditioned to root for Walter White no matter how monstrous he becomes, Jr.'s defiance feels almost like betrayal. That discomfort says far more about the audience than it does about the character. There are, of course, the detractors, the crowd that found his acting forced, his speech distracting, and his presence pointless. One almost wonders if these critics realize that the actor, R.J. Mitte, actually has cerebral palsy. Dismissing his performance because it doesn't conform to conventional rhythms is not only lazy, but inadvertently cruel. Mitte brought raw authenticity to a show that trafficked in artifice and lies. His halting cadence wasn't a flaw. It was a rebuke to every other character's fluent deception. Then there's the faction that simply finds him annoying. He whines. He sulks. He calls himself Flynn. Indeed, few identity crises in television history have been met with more hostility than a teenager deciding he wants to be called something cooler. It's as if the audience expected a 16-year-old living in suburban Albuquerque with a mother in full moral meltdown and a father secretly running a drug empire to respond with stoic maturity and clean diction. No, Walter Jr. does what any self-respecting adolescent would do. He rebels through branding. The Flynn persona is nothing more than a desperate attempt to separate himself from a father whose name was rapidly becoming a curse. If that makes him a dork, then it's the most understandable dorkiness on record. And yet, for all this realism, the writing undeniably failed him. Jr. floats through the series like a ghost of normalcy, an occasional reminder that people still eat breakfast in the world of Breaking Bad. Beyond that, he's a device, a symbol of the life Walt claims to be saving even as he obliterates it. The show never allows Junior to evolve beyond his father's justifications. Even when he's furious, refusing the blood money, condemning Walt to his face, he's still serving the protagonist's emotional arc. The tragedy of Walter Jr. isn't that he's underwritten, it's that he's written only in relation to other people's sins. Yet, in those rare moments where the show lets him breathe, he's luminous. Consider the scene after Walt's brutal fight with Jesse. Junior discovers his father beaten and broken, and for the first time believes the gambling lie. "At least you're real," he says tearfully. It's perhaps the only time anyone in Breaking Bad has spoken without irony. The irony, of course, is that he's wrong. His father has never been less real. But the sincerity of his misjudgment gives the moment its power. Junior wants authenticity in a world built on fabrication. His tragedy is not naivete, but faith. Plot-wise, his idolization of Hank provides another understated yet essential layer to Walter White's downfall. Junior doesn't merely love his uncle, he worships him. Hank is everything Walt isn't: confident, respected, unabashedly masculine. It's no coincidence that the first time Walt snaps is when his son is mocked by strangers and he must reassert himself as the protector. Walter's entire criminal evolution can be traced back to that bruised ego, to the unbearable knowledge that his son would rather be like Hank than like him. Walt's empire wasn't built for his family. It was built to impress a teenager who preferred his uncle's badge to his father's PhD. One can't help but notice that, from Walt's point of view, Junior is both his proudest creation and his greatest humiliation. The son he loves also embodies the weakness he loathes in himself. That resentment bubbles beneath every father-son scene. The awkward driving lesson, the rebuke about using both feet, the breakfast small talk. Walt demands perfection from his son not because he doubts him, but because he sees too much of himself in him. A son who overcame his disability while his father succumbed to self-pity. No wonder Walt alternates between affection and discomfort. The series wisely avoids spelling this out, but it's all there in the subtext. When Walter Jr. helps launch the Save Walter White website, the gesture is intended as love, yet Walt reads it as emasculation. His son's charity feels like pity, and pity is the one emotion Heisenberg cannot stomach. The campaign that could have united the family instead becomes a monument to Walter's pride. He cannot bear to be seen as dependent, least of all by his own child. It's fashionable among armchair critics to claim that the show forgot about Walter Jr. until the final season. That's only partly true. The writers didn't forget him, they sidelined him, because his existence was too damning. Every time Junior appears, the audience is reminded of what Walter pretends to be doing all this for. His presence punctures the myth of the noble outlaw. Without him, Walt could sell the illusion that his empire was a misguided act of love. With him, that lie collapses. And so, Junior becomes both the heart and the conscience of the show. In a universe populated by murderers, liars, and moral relativists, he's the one person whose compass never spins. He never breaks bad. He simply breaks away. That may not be as cinematic as a shootout or a lab explosion, but it's far rarer. Moral integrity in the Breaking Bad world is practically science fiction. His final phone call with Walt is perhaps the cruelest scene in the series, not because of violence, but because of finality. The son who once begged for authenticity now demands oblivion. "Why don't you just die?" he screams, the last words he'll ever say to his father. It's the only time someone tells Walter White the truth without dressing it up in metaphor. And fittingly, it comes from the one character who never knew the full story, yet somehow understood it best. The debate over Junior's future, would he join the DEA, become a teacher, or spiral into addiction like the father he despised, is almost beside the point. These fan fantasies reveal how desperate viewers are to give him an arc, any arc, to compensate for what the show withheld. Whether he becomes an agent or a manager at Denny's is irrelevant. What matters is that he survives. In the moral wasteland of Albuquerque, survival with dignity is rarer than blue meth. RJ Mitte deserves far more credit than he receives. His performance may not have been showy, but it was exact. When Junior holds the knife to protect his mother, when his voice cracks during the phone call, when he sits awkwardly between two girls at the gym assembly, each moment is small, precise, and heartbreakingly human. He plays a boy caught in the gravitational pull of two collapsing stars, and still manages to stand upright. The true irony of Breaking Bad is that Walter Jr., whom so many viewers dismiss as boring, embodies the very thing the show pretends to champion but never delivers: goodness. He is not corrupted, not compromised, not seduced by the power his father worships. His scenes may lack action, but they contain something the rest of the series systematically destroys: innocence. By the finale, he is the last person Walt cannot manipulate. His rejection of his father's blood money is the only moral victory left standing amid the wreckage. For those who insist he adds nothing to the story, consider this. Without Walter Jr., Walter White's transformation is meaningless. The family man excuse, the righteous crusade against poverty and mediocrity, all of it depends on a son who exists as both motivation and mirror. Without Jr., Walt's empire is just a vanity project. With him, it's a tragedy. Perhaps the writers feared that giving him more agency would risk diluting the show's central metaphor. After all, a son who confronts his father's evil too soon might puncture the mythic grandeur of Heisenberg's rise. But by limiting him to breakfast scenes and occasional outbursts, they traded narrative complexity for emotional simplicity. The result is a character who feels simultaneously essential and underused. A ghost haunting the edges of the story that claims to be about him. Walter Jr. may never have met Jesse Pinkman, but he didn't need to. Jesse was the son Walter wanted to mold. Jr. was the son he actually raised. The contrast between them exposes the duality at the heart of Breaking Bad. One son born of chemistry and ego, the other of blood and conscience. When Walt calls Jesse son in the bar, it's not affection, it's confession. He's admitting that he built a counterfeit family to escape the one he failed. In the end, Jr. is the soul that Walt cannot buy, lie to, or bury. The show's camera leaves him long before the story does. Perhaps because there's nothing left to say. He represents the one thing Walter White could never control: the moral judgment of those he claimed to love. For all the mockery about his breakfasts and his Flynn phase, Walter Jr. stands as Breaking Bad's quietest indictment. He is proof that goodness can survive even when genius curdles into monstrosity. In a world where every adult is busy rationalizing evil, he remains the only one who simply calls the cops. So no, Walter Jr. is not one-dimensional. He is, however, the single dimension of humanity left in a show obsessed with watching humanity burn. His father built an empire to prove he wasn't a failure. His mother lied to keep the peace. His uncle died for duty. But Walter Jr., he did what none of them could. He saw the truth and refused to participate. He may not have cooked meth, laundered money, or stared down a cartel, but he did something rarer. He survived the story and stayed good. That's not weakness, that's strength. And if the internet still insists on mocking him for loving breakfast, then so be it. In a world full of Heisenbergs, maybe the only decent man left really is the one who knows how to start the day right. In a world full of Heisenbergs, be a Walter Jr. Hit subscribe.